Hey guys, today I'm doing my very first tutorial, which is showing you the process of how I color and paint portraits. I'm starting out with a sketch, which is sped up because it's not really what the tutorial is about. But after this, we'll be doing live step-by-step showings of how I do my stuff. And I'm just going to be using the colors that you see on screen, but the techniques will apply to anything. And so, without any further ado, let's get started. Okay, before we get started, I do want to mention that this tutorial was requested by Phil Land a couple of times, and so I'm sorry it took so long, but I'm glad that I'm finally getting to it. Fair warning, this audio and drawing, everything I mention is going to be all over the place because it's my first tutorial and I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but I really hope it can be helpful. And so you can see right now I just have all the flats in, and so I want to start laying in the shading. And so this is going to be really hard shading. And so this is the color I've chosen. So if you take this color, I'm sure you've heard this before, but you take it and then you drag it cooler down on the color wheel, and then I tend to make it a little bit more saturated as I go darker, but that's just a preference for me. So this is the color we have, and yeah, so basically what you do is you think about where the light's going to be coming from, and for me, I'm thinking it's going to be coming from, like, up above, like from this direction, and so we'll just have to think about that, like, as we go, and it, like, just this arrow, I don't usually put it there, but I feel like it'll help really show what I'm doing. So back to our shading color, this is the color I chose for the skin, and so since we know the nose sticks out, we're just gonna lay something quick in there, and basically just continue this process until we have everything all shaded and just, you know, put where we want it to be. So I'll get right back to you after I'm finished doing the skin. Okay, so we've got these super basic things laid in, and you can just see where things pop out, it's like lighter and kept lighter, and where it's in shadow, I drew a shadow, obviously. And so before we get into highlights, I'm just going to quick do the shading, really basic shading, showing where I want to block everything in with all the other things in the pictures. Now we've got the basic shading laid in, and you might notice it is not looking so great, but at this stage in the painting it never does. Like, it looks fine when you have the flats in, but with the base shading, no blending, no highlights, it looks kind of gross. This is something that you just kind of get used to, but I thought I'd point it out in case you're starting to not trust me. I mean, then again, I wouldn't blame you. But anyways, now we're going to start on the highlights, and this is something that I myself often overlook, but it's really important. And so for choosing your highlight color, all you need to do is basically the opposite of choosing your shadow color. So you just go warmer on the color wheel and then go a little lighter. And I'll create a new layer for this. I don't generally, but it's probably helpful in case I screw up. And so now, again, we're just going to be laying in the highlights where the highlights go. Now I've laid in all the really basic highlights. You might have noticed that I didn't add any extreme white highlights around like the eyes or the lips where they normally would be. And I do add those, but not in this stage because they kind of just go on top of everything, so I wait until later to go in with that step. And so now we're just gonna keep layering in more tones, so you might add some in-betweens, but you also want to make sure you mix up the coolest and warmest instead of just like having a gradient between like the dark and the light. You just want to have like different tones everywhere, because if you just look at a human face, you'll know it's really diverse in tones. So I don't really know how to explain it, but one really helpful thing to do is to work off a reference picture. And we're also going to start doing some blending in this stage, so you'll see that. Okay, so at this point, we've laid in some more flats. We haven't got to the neck or the hair yet, but we've made a pretty decent crack on the face. And I just want to show you that this is a stage where I turn off the sketch. And so now we're working completely on our painting, and you can really tell where you need to clean up more. And so I thought I would use this part to show you how I do the blending for like how I mix the colors together, I guess. And so we're just going to move up to the eyes to do this example. And so basically what you do is I pick the darker color, which is this dark brown. And so you can see the color I have there. I turn my opacity to like 28, somewhere between like 28 and 42. It really depends on where I'm blending. But since this is a smaller area, we're going to go with 28. And then I just lay in a few brush strokes. And then I choose like an in-between tone. And then I just lay in some more brush strokes. And then choose more in-betweens. And then I go both directions. And eventually I get a nice effect that shows blending, I guess. I don't really know how to explain it. And then with this stuff down here, these highlights, this is really just a stylistic choice. It's not really how eyes are. So, I mean, if it's not really your cup of tea, like, it's definitely not anything required to do. But, I blend these a little bit less so they still really pop. And I'll add, a lighter tone in there. And hardly blend that at all, because I mean it might look harsh from right here, but once you zoom out it's not really that big of a deal, especially since later we're going to be adding the pupil, which is going to partially go over top that. So yeah, I hope you understand now kind of how I blend, and so I'm just gonna keep going. So you might have noticed that I just made a pretty big change with resizing the eyes, and I'm going to clean up around that, but I also think I'm going to do some changes with the face shape, and so I thought I'd point this out since it's, you know, pretty big changes. So what I'm going to be doing is moving around the facial features and changing the face shape, and it's going to look really weird at first, like right now how you can see on this eye, there's these jaggedy chunks around here. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change everything, and then I'm going to clean it up afterwards. And I'm hoping that it will make a difference. So I'll see you after that and tell you how it went. Well, I guess you'll see. Now we're done with smoothing out the face, and as you can see, I made some changes with the mouth and the eyes and the face shape, and I completely changed the color of the eyes because I felt like the tone I chose just wasn't really going with the piece, and so I went with a blue-gray tone to change that up. And so now we're going to start with the hair. And because Phil Land, in his request, asked how I did the blending on hair, I thought I would show that. So let's get started just right up here with the bangs. And I'm going to be honest with you, this is going to be the hardest part of this tutorial because I know that it was requested for me to show you how I do it, but I don't completely have like a set method yet that I'm really happy with. But I'm going to show you what I do for the most part. So what I'm doing right now is I chose an in-between color using the blending method that I showed you before, and I'm at like 50% opacity right now, and I'm just going in between, and I'm making sure my strokes are really loose, and I'm gonna actually make them a bit longer because with hair, that's just how it is. It's not going to be as smoothly shaded as in the skin. And so definitely make sure you overlap a lot. But one thing I struggle with is having, like I mentioned in my video called like the clouds one, is having spaghetti hair. So I'm going to try to keep this a bit more solid than usual because, I mean, that's what I want to have in my style, so that's what I'm going to show you. And so, as you can see right now, I have a pretty good base of just a bunch of, just a gradient, I guess, showing the structure of the hair. And I'm going to do that with all the strands. As you can see, like, I have them divided up by where I did the shading. And so, as soon as I get this into a dark tone, I'll show you what my next step is. So I have this pretty blended. I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, of course. And so then I'm just going to take kind of a mid-dark tone, and I'm going to just do some strands in there because, like, I don't want it to be too, like, big strands because then it's just not like hair. And so I'm going to do something more like this just to divide it up more. So, and while it's going in the same direction, it's nice to have it divided because then it just makes it different. And after the dividing, I'm just going to go in with a bit more shading, and this is basically what I do for hair. And so I'm just going to do this with all the hair because it would take forever to be talking while doing all of this. So, I'll get back to you when I'm done. So I got that shading done, and so now my favorite part of drawing hair is I'm going to add some loose strands. So what I'm going to do is pick like an in-between color. It doesn't matter too much. I'll be using a few different colors. I don't want full opacity, but like pretty close. So this is at like 90, and so I'll just grab a color, and I'll start light actually over here and just add some loose strands. And that really helps just make the hair look a bit more realistic, or not even realistic. That's not what I'm going for here, but just more accurate, I guess, more alive. I don't know how to describe it, but I don't know. I definitely like this part of the process. So, there's not really much to say about this. Just draw little strands everywhere. So, yeah, I'm just gonna do that quick. Now I am finished. I got the hair strands in, I did just a few cleanup things around the picture, and we're done. So I hope this process was at least a little bit helpful. It's my first tutorial, so sorry if it's all over the place, but I hope you got something out of it. And it was actually really fun to make, so just let me know if you have suggestions for other things you'd like tutorials on, and please give me suggestions on how I can make it better next time, because I really don't know what I'm doing. So, thank you for watching. Remember to rate, comment, and subscribe.